I am Joanna Shakti. We are here for the beginning of the 3-hour online virtual workshop called Soul Love Partnerships, from attraction and dating to lovemaking and marriage. How to ignite and keep soul love. I am excited to be spending a Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, for some of you Sunday morning, a time with you where we can actually roll up our sleeves, literally, and get really deep and interactive and raw and real about this thing called love. And this thing called love can be sometimes really exciting and really passionate. Sometimes it can be heartbreaking. And we want to spend this time together so that we can eliminate the heartbreak, so that we can ignite the passion, the intimacy, the depth that makes this journey of love extraordinary, mind-blowing, breathtaking, wordless, where we absolutely in moments can't find the words to express the depth of what we're experiencing. And so this is an invitation to see what gets in the way, what stops it, what kills love. And that's a strong word, but we really can. Some of the things we're going to talk about today can absolutely be the killers of love. And we want to shift that so that you know what it takes, what those that are in soul love partnerships do to have that love, to keep that love, to strengthen that love, to deepen that love. And the truth is, sometimes it is uncomfortable. Sometimes we have to be willing to go to the places that we haven't wanted to go so that we can get to the places that we do want to go. So today, that looks like there may be moments where you're like, oh, this hurts. Oh, I did that. Oh, my heart longs. Oh, I so want that. There might be other moments where you go, oh, if I'd only known that. Or, oh my gosh, at least I do now. Or, wow, that's why that happens. Or, oh, yeah, I did that. I think I'll not do that in the future. So we're going to really get specific about the mistakes that we make. We're going to get specific about the preparations that we need for soul love. Even if you've been married 40 years, doesn't matter. Those preparations are essential to set this foundation, and we're going to talk about that. And then we're also going to talk about, as I mentioned, what those that are in soul love partnerships, soulful lovers, actually practice. I'm going to invite you today to get out of your comfort zone, because your comfort zone is everything that you have right now. The relationships that you've had in the past, the relationship that you have right now, the experience that you have in dating, because this event is for singles and couples alike. Because the mistakes that we make and the practices that we use start from moment one of attraction, and they take us through the entire journey of marriage if that's how you choose partnership. But what you've got or what you've had in the past is within your comfort zone. What you want, the passion, the depth, the intimacy, the affection, the attention, the joy, that's all outside your comfort zone. And so the invitation is to let yourself get a bit uncomfortable when you might want to go, this is too much. And maybe you'll feel that and maybe you won't. But those moments, the truth is, the moments we want to run, the moments we want to say, the heck with it, it's not worth it, maybe it's not for me, those are the most important moments to stay right here on the journey. The most important moments to take the next breath and the next step, because that's where the transformation happens, when it gets uncomfortable and we want to quit, and then we take the next step. So that's the invitation today. We are on Facebook Live momentarily. We are going to move over to just our workshop session. And if you are on Facebook Live and you want to join this workshop session, or if you happen to be catching this a little bit later, if you want to access the workshop, go to ecstaticintimacy.com. The very top banner on the homepage, if you click that, it will take you to the page to register and access this workshop in its entirety. You'll be able to download the handout, to be able to listen and participate in the entire workshop. So again, ecstaticintimacy.com, click the top banner, go to that registration page, and you will get the link to join us and access the entire workshop. So let me bring up my slides as we continue to dive in today. And in a moment, you will see these. I just have to click a couple of buttons. And here we are. So you know at this point, you are in the workshop, Soul Love Partnerships, from attraction and dating to lovemaking and marriage, how to ignite true love and keep it. I'm Joanna, the Soul Love Mentor, founder of Ecstatic Intimacy and designer of the Soul Love Roadmap. And we're going to talk about that roadmap today. Before we dive into the core of our content, the truth is, as I was mentioning in our introduction, is that breakups and arguments and unfortunately ghosting, I couldn't be more of someone to recommend that you never ghost again. If you're single. If you're in relationship, the truth is there's a way that ghosting can show up in relationship too. We check out, we shut down, we walk away, we don't talk about it. Ghosting is one of the most painful experiences, and it does not have to be that way. And you're going to learn today some ways and the importance of speaking and being authentic when it comes to loving, dating, relating, anywhere on that spectrum. There's also way too much settling for what doesn't work for you. Way too much settling in love relationships, but that actually doesn't happen in a soul love partnership. And we'll talk about what that looks like. So the pain of those breakups, those arguments, the settling, I'm trying to click forward to my next slide. When you know how to walk this path of soul love, it can turn those challenges, those heartaches, into something incredibly intimate, deeper than you could have ever imagined, more passionate than you've ever imagined, and truly devoted, a place where you are absolutely at one. I've talked with so many, and I'm going to try to adjust. I tried to plan for this. The sun is changing right here, and so forgive a little bit of the lighting. It's going to work its way out as we go on, and I'm going to try to keep myself into a little bit of light, but bear with that as the sun is setting in front of me. But the truth is, we're talking about relationships that have a quality of reverence and devotion and depth, a quality of oneness, where if we're lovemaking, where does one body begin and the other one end? Where does one heart end and the other begin? Where you fall into a space that is exquisitely divine, a union of heart, mind, body, spirit, and soul. And we can have that when we are willing to be real. We can have that when we are willing to get intimate. We can have that when we are willing to open our hearts in our amazingness and in our not so amazingness, or in other words, our messiness, our imperfection. And that's the place where we can access the deepest, most extraordinary love. And that's the journey we're talking about today. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here, to listen to this, to watch this, because it takes courage to have a soul partnership. And when any person, one person, one person in a relationship, one person in a family, one person in a community, one person in a world, and there's a whole lot more than one person listening to this, watching this. But that one person, you, makes a massive difference when it comes to love. And there's a ripple of energy when one commits to more love. The partnership, the dating, the relationship has to change. The world actually changes. And it's one of my biggest gratitudes for those that step onto this path of soul love, that you actually become that ripple of love in the world. So thank you for being here. Thank you for committing to your heart, to your relationship, to the next relationship. Because for singles, this is so the time to discover what soul love partnership really means and to create yourself, not to create yourself, I want to say that differently, to bring yourself fully into this experience of dating and relating. Because when you bring yourself fully, you're going to attract an entirely different partner into your life. And then you're going to know how to set that foundation. So the courage, thank you for having the courage and the commitment to open into soul love partnership. Whether you're attracting it or you have the ingredients for it, you have a partner, but you haven't quite stepped into soul love partnership yet. Thank you. In case you're wondering, you are in the right place if you've struggled on some level to maintain love and passion, whether that's in a past relationship, whether that's in your current relationship. If you've struggled, you're going to get the answers today. If you've ever dated someone that you really knew wasn't a fit, but you dated them anyway, or you found yourself putting up with, tolerating, settling for anything in your life, settling for the better than nothing in relationship, settling for a position that you don't want in a career, settling for doing the things that you don't want to do. So we want to talk about the part of you that settles, because it does not give you the path to soul love. It doesn't give you the foundation of a soul love partnership. If you're someone, and I was one of these people, if you try to do the right thing, if you try to be the right person, and it still never really works out for you, we're going to talk about that and why it actually sets you up to fail, why it sets you up for heartache. If the thought of soulmate love and soulmate partnership is like, oh, I want that, but another part of you is like, I don't know, it scares you on some level. Like, do I have to be that vulnerable? Do I have to be that intimate? Is it going to be a lot of work? If you've got those questions, if a part of it's exciting, if a part of it's scary, this is the perfect place. If you want to find that soulmate and ignite or reignite, if you've already met your soulmate, that love, this is going to tell you what it takes. And we're talking about a soulful path here. Excuse me, like I knew it was coming. If you are willing to walk that soulful path of love, step by step, moment by moment, going deeper and deeper, opening wider and wider. One of my sacred sexuality teachers used to speak about how open is open. Is this open? Is this open? Is this open? If I could bend my fingers back, is that open? Well, the truth is we get to open deeper and deeper and deeper to the bigger, bolder, brighter, more ecstatic experiences of love. But we have to do that one step at a time. Oops, let's go the other direction. And here's what we're going to talk about. Here's what we're going to explore in our journey together today. We're going to start with the 12 reasons that relationships end, and how to eliminate the mistakes that cause those relationships to end, that cause the unhappiness, that worse yet, have caused the divorce or divorces, that have caused the breakups and the heartache. We're going to talk about what does it take to be a master dater, and then more importantly, a master relater, because if we're dating, we're looking for relationship. And the truth is, even once we're in relationship, we still need to be a master dater, because from beginning to end, both of those qualities within you are essentially important. We're going to look at, I've mentioned this, but we're going to look at the exact roadmap that someone walks to take and create a soul love partnership. I'm revealing things in this workshop that I've only actually ever shared with my long-term in-depth clients before. And not that I was trying to hide it. It's just that's the path that we walked. And so I've taken for this workshop and said, okay, what are the steps that I'm taking those long-term clients, those that have committed to that path of soul love, and removing every obstacle, every roadblock to that path? I'm sharing those exact steps that I take them on and have for years. Ah, we are going to talk about how to discover the actual, your personal soul purpose of relationship. And in looking at that, how to recognize if there's truly a fit. We're going to go into the 8 major requirements that every person must meet if you want a soul love partnership. How you prepare for true soul love, even if you're married. Whenever I work with a couple, I work with individuals and I work with couples. Whenever I work with a couple, we have to start with the 2 individuals that are having that relationship, and how are each of those 2 individuals showing up to create the dynamic that is happening in that partnership. We're going to go into the 8 critical practices that all soul partners, all soul love partners use to maintain and also deepen that partnership, because we want it to keep getting stronger, deeper, more intimate, more ecstatic, more divine, day by day, month by month, year by year, decade by decade. That's what we're up to. We're going to talk about the number 1 critical, essential way to exponentially take the chances of your relationship lasting up beyond what you could have imagined, how to exponentially increase it. And then we're going to get into the truth about soul sex. And we're going to talk about 5 ways that men sabotage it. We're going to talk about 5 ways that women undermine it. Because the truth is, sex is something that so often we don't talk about. One of the things that I'll say is, if you can't talk about sex, don't have it. It is so important to have that vocabulary and that ability to talk about this essential part of divine union, of soulful love. So why do I do what I do? Well, let me tell you, this was not a path that I intended to follow. And I'm going to pause right here, because as much as I tried to adjust the lighting before I started, it's coming down, and give me 1 moment. I will be right back. Okay. Oh, so much better. So much better. Sorry about that, you guys. I thought I had them down far enough. Okay. So if we're going to spend this 3 hours together, I want to share with you why I do what I do. And truly, that this wasn't my path, but the truth is it was. And I just didn't know it, because it really started back in the heart of the 70s, in the women's movement, in the divorce movement. I got so conditioned on who I thought I was supposed to be as a woman. And there was so much judgment. And this happens for men. It happens for those that are heterosexual. It happens for those that are all along the gender spectrum, all along the sexual expression of relationships. There's so much conditioning. For me, the conditioning was that I was supposed to be this powerful woman, and I followed that women's movement. I also was part of one of the first divorced families in our neighborhood, and I learned a lot about love. Unfortunately, I thought it was the truth, but it wasn't. And it set me up for my own failures. It set me up for my own heartaches. It set me up to cry tears way too often. And part of what I learned was, well, part of what I believed, not this was because we also take on beliefs, and our beliefs, whatever we believe, is the truth. It's our reality. Wayne Dyer back in the 70s wrote a book called I'll See It When I Believe It. But what we walk around saying is, I'll believe it when I see it. But it doesn't work that way. Our beliefs create our realities, but our beliefs aren't the truth, because I believed as a kid I wasn't lovable. I believed that men always left. I believed that love hurt. And all of those beliefs had me start acting and behaving in ways that created more of the very things that I was afraid of, more of the things that broke my heart. So heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. I decided that I never wanted to depend on a man. And so I went into electrical engineering, got an MBA, and started climbing the corporate ladder in the oil and gas and high tech industries of Houston, Texas in the 90s. I was proud of outmanning the men, except I cried because they never stayed in relationship with me. I cried because we never had sex. Or if we had sex, I was always longing for something. And oh, by the way, I couldn't really have an orgasm. And it was years of once in a great while, I'd get an orgasm. And I blamed it on all the men. I'm like, why do I keep meeting all the sexually repressed men? And years later, I was like, it was never them, it was me. See, those men couldn't have shown up in my life because of the beliefs and the fears and the conditioning that I had. So I couldn't attract them. I actually repelled them. And I was really unhappy. Thank God. I kept thinking there had to be something different. There had to be a way. And after a few workshops, I found myself with one of the critical answers for me. And it was that there's a difference between masculine and feminine energy. There is a difference between men and women. And oh, by the way, we'll talk about masculine and feminine doesn't equate directly to male female. There's a strong correlation, but these two energies answered why I was miserable, why I was successful, why I was promoted, why I couldn't have an orgasm, and why I was divorced. And then I married that. Well, that was what told me, that wake-up call was what told me I was going to leave corporate. And it told me that I was here to serve women so they didn't have to go through the pain that I went through, and to serve the men that we love so that they didn't have to go through the pain that I put men through. And I really did. Like, I have apologized many times, personally and energetically, to the men that I couldn't show up with. So I took this wisdom about the masculine and feminine and started marrying that with getting my advanced certified tantric educators training. Sacred sexuality, what did that mean? How do we come together as divine masculine, divine feminine, and make love, not just make love, but live in a way that takes us to the edges of ecstasy and beyond. Partner yoga, masculine, male-female dynamics, male-female communications, all of the ways that we are different. And then I brought in cellular healing and spirituality, and all of that ignited a path for me where I could create that soul love roadmap, where I can serve men and women, singles and couples around the world. And it is my privilege to do so. And today it is my privilege to serve you. So thank you for being here. We are now going to jump into the first major segment of our workshop today. I am going to stop our Facebook Live. I want to remind you that there is a handout that was in your confirmation email. If you haven't downloaded it or opened it on your computer, if you've got it to print, print it. It's great. You can make some notes. We're really going to have an opportunity as we go through this for you to look at, how do I do this? Where have I done this? And start to see the important pieces on this journey that you need to pay attention to. So open that handout if you'd like. And I am going to pause for a moment and stop our Facebook streaming. I want to remind you, if you've been with us on Facebook, to go to ecstaticintimacy.com. And on that homepage, click the top banner. And that banner will take you to a registration page where you will get your personal link to join us for our workshop. For those of you that are in our workshop, I want to tell you how you can interact with me. And there are, let me pause our Facebook Live. Where is, okay, Facebook Live is stopped. And so now you have a couple of ways that you can interact with me. And the first is that there is a chat window. And so you can post questions in that chat window. I will watch them. At some points, I will answer them during the particular topic that I'm talking about. I also might save them, and there'll be a couple of points where you'll have the opportunity to directly ask me questions, where you can raise your hand and I can open up your microphone and we can actually have an interaction to directly support you. And you can also, there is also a Q&A window. And if you prefer to put your questions in the Q&A window, you can do that as well. You can find all of those on the, whether you're on your phone or you're on a computer, you can find all of the icons where you can open up that Q&A window, where you can open up the chat window and invite you to put your questions there or to put your comments there so that we can interact and integrate those into our training today. So let you get a chance to do those, and we are going to now move forward with the first reason that I wanted to make sure I had my windows where I could see them to support you. All right. When we look at these, I said we were going to the first reason that relationships end, which is really the mistakes that we make. But before I do that, I want to remind you, or actually invite you to look at this path of soul love in 3 different phases. And the first part that we're going to look at as we look at these mistakes and the reasons relationships end is how we didn't prepare. Like it's critical. And couples, yes, the good news is, even if you didn't prepare back then, you can do this preparation now, which is going to set the foundation to take your relationship to higher and higher heights, deeper and deeper love. So, first mistake. You can follow along with these mistakes on the handouts. And on the handout, you'll see that in front of each mistake, there's actually a little check box. And if you are making this mistake, I want to invite you to put a little check mark there. And the way we're going to explore this is I'm going to share with you the mistake. And then we're also going to look at the signs and symptoms that you can recognize. Am I doing this? Now, here's something I want to say. These mistakes are not something that you get to judge yourself for. They are not something that you get to beat yourself up for. They are not something to blame your partner or your exes. They are simply ways to empower you to recognize, what do I want to do differently moving forward? That's what's important here. So for those of you that like to be hard on yourselves, and I have been one of those people, use this to empower you, not judge you, not to judge anyone else either. So, first mistake, you don't have clarity on what it is that you exactly want in relationship. And not only what you want, but what you actually need. Because so often we jump into relationship without having this clarity. And without this clarity, we make poor choices. So the signs and symptoms that you have or are making this mistake is that you can't easily articulate your personal and relationship values, the things that are important to you, the things that are essential to you in terms of the values that you hold. Here's another one. If you jump into, as soon as someone is interested in you, you are in. You jump at that chance to have a relationship without actually looking at, is this person really right for me? And most especially, or worse yet, you jump in when your gut says no. Now, I will make one side note is that sometimes what you can feel as your gut saying no is actually fear. And this might be something that's really good, but maybe you've been hurt in the past and there's an unconscious resistance. And so that's another important part when we're looking at this clarity of vision, what you desire, that we need to know that because then it's also going to show us where your resistance can show up. I'm going the wrong way. You date someone, or worse yet, you get into long-term relationship with someone who has different long-term goals, who wants different things than you do. And you think you'll change their mind. So you think that they want to live in a part of the country that you don't want to live in, or you think that you want children and they don't. They don't want to get married, but you do. And I can tell you this happens all too often. We start a relationship hoping they'll love me enough, they'll change their mind. It is a setup for heartache. Corollary to that, you wait to tell somebody those important things to you until they really like you because you think they'll change their mind or you think they'll stay once the love is good, but it sets you up for failure. You need to know what those deal breakers are. You need to know what the qualities of the relationship are that you want. And this speaks to the next point is you think that having a vision is having a list of qualities that you want your partner to have. That will not get you there. It actually will. That's probably one of the worst things that you can do because you're missing the entire essence of what the relationship, the soul love partnership is actually about. And if you are trying to be the right person rather than trying to find the right person, it's a sign that you're just trying to get a relationship and you'll settle. And we're going to look at this actually in another mistake, but you'll settle for the better than nothing. And that will never get you soul love partnership. Here's another one. If you're so picky that nobody is ever a good fit for you, it actually means that you don't have clarity on what is actually important for your soul, your heart. It's a way that pickiness can be a way of actually avoiding because soul love partnerships inherently are going to have ups and downs. We have this fantasy, we have this fairy tale of what it's going to be like. And those fairy tales set you up to fail because soul love partnership will go through the ups and the downs. So, and that's actually part of the vision is how do we navigate the inherent ups and downs of our partnership? So if you feel like you have or are making this mistake, put a little check mark on your worksheet. Or if you're not writing on the worksheet, put a little tick mark in your notes. Okay, number 2. You are taking your baggage with you and you're picking up more along the way. And it gets heavier and heavier and harder to have that in-depth connection. So if you think that you get over your last breakup by getting back out there into the dating world, you are setting yourself up to have baggage and future separation. If you think that hurt and anger will just go away over time, they don't. That's a way to set yourself up to again fail in the future, to carry that baggage, because they don't just go away. But the good news is you can actually make them go away when you know how to clean up the past, when you know how to let the feelings come and go. Complete. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but presence and the willingness to go through what has to happen to let go sets you up for a more extraordinary future than truly you could imagine. If you're in a relationship, or you can look back to a past relationship and wonder why you get so easily irritated, why your fuse, so to speak, seems so short, it's because you haven't cleaned up the past. It's because in this relationship, you're sticking things under the rug, putting them up on the shelf, stuffing it down, eating, distracting, drinking, even having sex to ignore your issues. It's going to eventually devastate love. If you've said, I'm never going to let that happen again, I'm going to make sure that the next person I date doesn't do those things that the last one did. One, you're actually setting yourself up to attract someone that will do what you did in the past. It's also necessary that until we shift the patterns, we're going to keep meeting people that trigger those patterns. So what's beautiful is we can, and we'll talk about this when we get into the actual steps for preparing how to clear the past. And as I mentioned, worse yet, you keep attracting the same things over and over again because you haven't completed with that pattern. You haven't let go of the hurt, and it gets re-triggered. If you've ever been in a relationship where you wonder, like, God, I can't remember the last time we had good sex, or I can't remember the last time we had sex, it's because you haven't dealt with the upsets, the baggage, the incomplete experiences. One of the ways that I describe this in relationship is that in the beginning of a relationship, things are good. You're in love. The sex is good. The chemistry is hot. You are talking about all these amazing things and seeing all the ways that you're so connected. And we don't pay a lot of attention to the ways that we may have challenges. And many of us don't want to rock the boat. We're going to talk about conflict, and we avoid it, and we stick the things under the rug. But the problem is that rug is really big in the beginning. It spreads across the living room floor, and you can stick quite a few things under it before you realize that there's a problem. But eventually you keep sticking things under the rug, and you keep sticking things under the rug, and you keep sticking things under the rug, and all of a sudden the center of that rug is growing higher and higher and higher. And one of you is standing on this side of the rug, and the other one's standing on this side of the rug, and you're kind of looking over that pile in the center going, no, not interested in sex tonight. No, not tonight either. I'm not even sure I'm in love with you anymore. I love you, but I don't know if I'm in love with you anymore. See, this is what happens in couples, and this is the baggage in relationship. But then we still don't deal, even we break up, we don't deal with it. We're not in love with you anymore. We're not having sex, and we go our separate ways. But we didn't clean up what was under the rug. And so now you take the remnants of that into your next relationship. So single or partnered, we got to clear out the old to make space for the love that is always there. We've just separated. And that's what happens with baggage. If you've never asked the question, why do I have space for relationship? If you haven't asked that question, even if you're in relationship, it's a really key question. And without it, it sets us up. So if kids are the focus and the connection point in relationship, this is a space challenge. If your schedule is so full that you think a dating service is the way to meet your next mate, we need to make some space, because even if that dating service were to work, you wouldn't be able to actually bring that relationship into your life. If your schedule is so full that it takes a month to get something on your calendar, we need to make some space. And it's not all about just your calendar, but that's one of the expressions. If prioritization of what priority should this relationship be? Where does this actually fit? And not just the relationship, but where do I fit on the priority list? Those are going to be, if you don't get yourself and the relationship into the right place on the priority list, it's a setup for failure. It's a setup to end. If you have pictures of your ex around, this is going to be a place that actually is an unconscious barrier to attracting and building the love that you want. Literally, we need space in our home. We need space in our nightstands. We need space in our closets to actually open up the field to attract a partner. And this is that same point, is what's happening in your home, what's happening in your garage, what's happening in your heart, which is the next thing that we want to talk about, is if you find yourself struggling, it is, and trust, there's often that there isn't space in this heart, in this being. So we need to open up the walls of protection to create space for you to let that love flow in and flow out. Reason 4, you don't have a strong, deep relationship with you. This relationship with you is the most important relationship you will ever have. And I know we're here talking about romantic relationships, but you can't have a strong romantic relationship if you don't have a strong relationship with you. It's just foundational. It reminds me, we'll talk about this in a moment, of another way to say this is you can't love another until you love yourself. And that phrase sucks, in my opinion. Well, no, actually, it doesn't suck now. It did suck. I can tell you a story of college, and there was a man that I was so attracted to. And he literally said to me, I will not date you because you don't love yourself. And I'm like, what are you talking about? 19, 20. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. I totally am. I can so love you. Unfortunately, fast forward 15 more years, and I'm like, dang, he was right. He was right. And so we'll talk about really in depth this relationship with you as we continue. And one of the ways that we know that that relationship isn't strong with you is if you do the nice girl or the nice guy thing, where you want to be the one to make them happy, where you're the one that says, whatever you want, honey, where you're the one that says that you want to go to the auto show and they want to go to the mall and you go to the mall, where they want to see the action shoot 'em up movie and you want to see the romantic movie and you go with them. Now, there are times that we may choose out of generosity, but too often we're choosing because we don't trust the love. And so we actually will sell ourselves out to try to keep the love. And that creates resentment, and resentment is that killer of love. It creates separation when what we're trying to do is create connection by going along with what they want, that we actually create more separation. So the nice girl and the nice guy do not do good relationships. If you've ever sold yourself out, and really I talk about going along to get along, but the idea of I'll set aside what I want because this will make them happy. I'll set aside what I want because then we won't have an argument. Again, it will set you up for failure, to end. If you don't know your needs, your wants, your desires, your turn ons, if they come last, not only do you not know them, but they come last because everybody else is more important than you, it's a setup for heartache. Again, if you don't know what makes you happy. So I'll most often say this to women because masculine men want to make their feminine partners happy. was something that I so didn't understand. But truly, men want to make women happy. But if we're not make happyable, and we need to know what makes us happy, and we've done the things to take care of ourselves, to allow us to have the capacity to have joy and love and pleasure. So if we don't know what makes us happy, or we're not make happyable, it's because this relationship isn't as strong as it needs to be. Again, we've talked about this. If their happiness is higher priority than yours, it's going to challenge the relationship. The better than nothing partner will never be your soul love partner. It won't work. And like I said, if you think you're going to get that love, I want to find love. If you say that, you've got to realize that the love that comes in a relationship is amplifying the love that already exists here. It amplifies the love that you are emanating. And now the two of you get to take that love and go bigger and bigger and bigger with it. But it all starts with you. Go back to that when I actually don't think I told you this in my story. I married 6'3", blonde-haired, blue-eyed, par golfer, concert pianist, you name it, Prince Charming. And we were divorced 4 years later. And see, I was one of those that I was trying to get that love from him. I wanted him to love me. I wanted him to fill the hole in me where I didn't believe I was lovable. The insecurity in me. Do I really deserve love? Am I really good enough? Do I really have what it takes? Will he really like me over the long term? Because if he knew that, see, I wanted him to fill the emptiness in me. And he couldn't. It was impossible. Absolutely impossible. He couldn't have loved me enough for me to feel loved. And we didn't stay together long because I didn't have the capacity to be loved. So, relationship with you is essential. And we are messy, men and women alike. We have the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we have to be willing to be seen in the good, the bad, and the ugly in order to actually trust love. And the kind of love that we are talking about here today, the divine union, the ecstatic ecstasy, it comes not in spite of, but because of the good, the bad, and the ugly within us. To be loved unconditionally, the only way we can actually feel unconditional love is if we let someone know the things that we don't think are lovable. And then we're loved anyway. That's the kind of love that we're talking about. So those were the preparation mistakes. Let's talk about the attraction mistakes, which is the next piece of the journey. And attraction is not just in dating. Attraction is also in our long-term partnership. What keeps that chemistry, that attraction hot and deep and passionate over the long term? So if you think equal and independent are sexy, you're actually mistaken. That was my belief system. I thought if I show up equal to the men and I show them that I can actually, well, it wasn't so smart for me to try to outdo the men, but it was like, I can do everything that you can do. Well, here's one of the things about masculine men is they actually want something to contribute to. So they actually need a partner who is willing to receive, and not just willing to receive, but loves receiving. That's part of what the masculine wants to contribute. So what we're talking about here is masculine and feminine energy, which I mentioned. That was the wake-up call that propelled me onto this journey, because what I realized is there was a feminine woman buried inside me who I despised, truthfully. Like, no, she's weak. That would be pathetic. To say that I had needs was on some level pathetic. And that was what I thought feminine was needy and pathetic and weak and a doormat. And so I denied everything that might have looked feminine. But Masculine energy is attracted to feminine energy. Feminine energy is attracted to masculine. They are like two magnets, the opposite ends of the magnets. When you put them together, they come together and they stick. And it actually takes some force to pull them apart. But what I was doing as the electrical engineer with the MBA, climbing that corporate ladder, I was all masculine, but I was attracted to the masculine men, and they went the other direction. So then I would go and try to ask them out, and maybe they'd say yes, and maybe something would happen for a little while, but then it would all fizzle. This is the realm of the friend and roommate zone, because it is when we neutralize or even neuter the energy, the chemistry between those two opposite polar energies, everything goes flat. And that's the equal and independent. Equality builds barriers, and it absolutely separates us. We have to be able to have interdependence. So, what are some of the signs and symptoms of this? The first one is that we try to avoid being male or female. We try to be same, where we are same, but we are different. And so the truth is, there's a lot of attraction between masculine and feminine, as I said. And so if we're trying to avoid masculine and feminine energy and trying to be just like them, we aren't going to have this chemistry. If you're a woman, this was me, who thinks you have to have it all together before a man is going to want you, it's a mistake. Like they want someplace to contribute. And again, that's not equal to needy. It's willing to receive. And just as much as there has been conditioning for women about how they're supposed to be, there's also been a ton of conditioning for men and worrying that if you really claim your desires, if you really show up as who you are, if you say what you want, she's going to think you're a jerk, or worse yet. And so there's an invitation. See, men have been conditioned to be sensitive, to be that nice guy. And sensitivity and emotionality is amazing. It is hot in a man. But as long as it doesn't obscure the masculine essence, it is, I like when I'm in some of my larger workshops and we have men and women together, I'll often say to the women, is a man who stands up tall, who knows who he is, what he's committed to, where he's going, is he attractive? And the women all go, yes, yes, yes. And I go, okay, take that same man who stands tall, who knows who he is, where he's going. He's got that presence. And then he opens his heart and they're like, oh. See, he gets even more attractive. But it's not at the expense of his masculinity. It is with the masculinity. So I want to say something here. I mentioned early on that masculine and feminine are not equal to male and female. Masculine and feminine are energies that exist in all of our bodies, every single body. So what's important is that for most of us, one of those energies was predominant and the other energy is secondary. And we want to see which one is our predominant energy. I thought masculine was my predominant energy. It was so feminine. And this is what happens with the majority, actually, of men and women that I work with, is that they actually believe that their authentic energy, authentic predominant energy, is the opposite energy. And this is where we give mixed signals and we neutralize this energy. So what's important is that you discover, again, which one is predominant for you. And for most men, masculine energy is predominant. For most women, feminine energy is predominant, but not always. Sometimes it's reversed. And there are, again, a small percentage that actually have neutral energy. So know that this doesn't have anything to do with orientation. It doesn't have to do with anything. It doesn't have anything to do with what form of relationship or who we're attracted to. This plays out in same-sex relationships as well, but it's about the energies of attraction. If you are a woman who I like to say the modern day woman, her mantra is, no, no, I've got it. Where the mantra of the happy woman is thank you as she receives. If you found yourself, I mentioned this when I was introducing this mistake, if you found yourself in the friend or roommate zone, that is a sure sign that things are off in the masculine and feminine energy expression. So now the last one ties into this one. And if you don't fully own and express your sexuality, again, I mentioned earlier, sexuality is such a fundamental part of our relationships. And yet, our society says, don't talk about that. You guys may or may not know this, but I was on America's Got Talent several years ago. And there was an opportunity for me to give a kissing lesson and really bring that from a place of sacred sexuality. And what is it that if we are bringing the sacredness to our sexuality, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. But so this kissing lesson that was completely a normal kiss. We're on America's Got Talent. Yes, it's on NBC and it's on primetime TV. But I had one of my colleagues email me after that aired. And what happened was they had in the audience a woman who turned and put her hand over her son's eyes. I'm going to guess the son was 10 years old, maybe 12, that he couldn't see a kiss. This is the kind of conditioning that so many of us have been exposed to, that we are not allowed to talk about, express, or share our intimacy, our sexuality. Now, no, we're not going to bring our full sexuality out into public, but a kiss, it's precious. And what's it like to be able to, what if we could actually leave a party and instead of saying, oh, we're going home early, we could say, we're going home to make love, and that be normal and natural. So here's some of the ways that you can recognize if you're not owning and able to fully express your sexuality. And sure sign, if there's any shame, embarrassment, inhibition, where you feel like it's not okay to have the desires, the turn-ons, even the fantasies that you have, this is an invitation to want to come into a more authentic relationship with your sexuality. If you've ever thought, I don't care if I ever have sex again, there's a way that that's an indicator of disconnecting from a natural, innate energy. And oh, by the way, this goes until you are, as long as you are here on this planet. I had one couple where he was in his 80s and she was in her late 60s, and they had the best sex of their lives. Listening to him, I got the pleasure of listening to him talk about, oh my gosh, I finally get to see her and pleasure her in a way that feels so amazing. And wow, I didn't know sex could be this good. And he was in his 80s. So it's never too late to actually discover the fullness of your sexuality. Another thing that that particular couple, but I've seen this so often, is that we feel like we turn the lights off, which means you don't have to see my body, we don't have to, or sounds, like lights and we turn the lights off so we're not seeing as much, or we don't make sounds. And sounds are an innate part of our pleasure. And we'll let our neighbors hear us argue, but we'll try not to let them hear us make love. Just notice. If you're a man who has the same routine over and over and over again, it doesn't mean that we have to jump into all of the different expressions of sexuality. I mean, you get to find what's true for you. But part of that is finding what's true for you and not just staying in a little box. What else actually invites you into that fullest expression? And oh, by the way, feminine women need variety. So if it's routine, it will not last. The spark will not stay. This ties back again to the masculine feminine dynamic. But if you are a woman who would love to be ravished, to be in that hot, steamy kiss up against the wall, to have that man penetrating you with his eyes, with his being, with his body, and yet it doesn't seem to happen that way, it's an invitation to look at what is the programming and the conditioning that is happening within you. And on the flip side, if you are a masculine man who feels like it's not okay to kiss her against the wall, it's not okay to be that full presence that wants to ravish her. Now, this is all done in the context of agreements and the trust. But once we have those agreements and trust, then to let that fullest expression arise and expand. And I said this earlier, if you can't talk about sex, don't have it. Now, singles, that's more appropriate for you. Couples, if you haven't been talking about sex, it is to open up this conversation step by step so that you can create what it is you both truly desire. And yes, your needs may be different. Not only may they be different, they will be different. Your turn-ons will be different. And to be able to talk about that so that you can each be in your satisfaction and your fullest pleasure. And if either you or your partner has struggled with orgasms like I did, there's an invitation to fully get to know and express and enjoy your sexuality, which allows that orgasmic energy to flow and ignite. And I haven't mentioned it for the last few mistakes, but remember, if you recognize that you've been making these mistakes, make sure to put those check marks or the check marks on your handout, tick marks on your notes. And so I'll give you a moment to go ahead, if you haven't been doing that, and to take that moment, or take this moment now and do that on your handouts. And I needed to give myself a little bit of water. So let's jump on to the next one. This one, it seems so obvious, and yet I can't tell you the vast majority of individuals and couples where truth is not a fundamental part of relationship. And remember, I told you I would tell you the number one way to exponentially increase the chances that your relationship is going to last? It's this one. If you tell the truth, even when you don't think they'll like the truth, it is the glue that bonds relationships. The truth bonds us. When we are not telling the truth, it's like this infiltration into trust that starts to it cracks the foundation. It literally cracks the foundation, because if we don't make a commitment to telling that truth, we're always going to wonder on some level, even if quietly, subconsciously. And I've heard so many men say, well, she's going to ask me if, does she look good in that dress? And I don't want to hurt her feelings. Well, the thing is, sometimes with truth, we may hear something we don't want to hear, but at least we can trust it. She will love hearing what she doesn't want to hear more than wondering if you're actually telling the truth. The truth will actually turn her on over and over and over again, because she can trust you. And trust is fundamental for a feminine woman. So what are some of the signs? You put on a happy face when you're not actually happy. Being real is what is attractive. Now, I said earlier, we have to be make happyable. We have to take responsibility for our own happiness. But when we're not okay, to be honest that we're not okay, I mentioned, if you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, like I don't want to hurt their feelings, so you actually do what's not right for you so that they don't get hurt, who's actually in relationship? If you're not telling the truth, you're trying to do what makes them happy, they don't actually know who you are. And there's a falsity that's happening. Like, I don't actually know this person. I think I know this person, but they're not actually telling me the truth all the time. They're trying to say what they think I'm going to like. And who is this person? And sometimes it's only years later that we find out that somebody didn't like something we thought they did. And oh, by the way, omitting the truth, just leaving things out, that's another way that we are actually undermining relationship. I had a client a few years back, and she shared that she used to go on dates. And when the date would ask her a question about what she liked or what she wanted, she would try to figure out what he would like. And that was how she answered. The inauthenticity sets us up for so much pain. Ghosting, that's an absolute way that we're not telling the truth. And when we have the courage to speak the truth with kindness, we emanate love and it comes back to us 1,000-fold. If you say you're fine when things really aren't fine, this again separates us and we can't trust. So if you've had agreements, and one of the things when we go a little bit further here, you're going to know that soulful agreements are part of a soul love partnership. And we have agreements. We can make agreements about telling the truth. And so if someone says they're fine, we can trust it. But that means we have to stay in integrity to tell the truth if we're not actually fine. And so someone actually asked what ghosting is. So let me answer that question real quickly. Ghosting is the practice that has become more and more common, is that we go out with someone a few times and then all of a sudden they stop calling. Instead of saying, thank you for those dates and I don't feel like it's a fit, they just stop texting, they stop calling. And when we've actually had interaction. So that's what ghosting is. And so this saying fine, the other thing is, so often we've made love. Some of us have made love when we don't want to make love, but we think that's what we should do in a relationship. It's again another way to create resentment and separation. You don't tell your date or your beloved what you actually need, what you actually desire, what you actually want. You can't give and receive in a flowing kind of way if we don't actually know what the needs are. And if you think that they should figure it out, if they really knew you, that again is a setup for heartache and failure. Like, set each other up, tell each other the truth, set yourselves up both to have more joy, more love by telling the truth. And this is what I was just saying. If you think you have, if you ask for it or you tell them what you need or want, that it won't be as good, it's not true. That's a story that we can tell ourselves. Oh, if I have to ask for it. Well, you can provide the information. Wow, I would love to do this. Boy, it would be great to go to out for Mexican tonight, or it would be great to go out of town next weekend. And even if we're feminine, like when we get into the depths of this, like the feminine is not the initiator. The masculine is the initiator, the pursuer. But the feminine can provide really good data that the masculine can use to create a great experience. And if you've said yes when the truth was really no, this is one of the most painful things we can do to ourselves, is saying yes when the truth is no, because we abandon ourselves. And self-abandonment is the number one. There was a 40-year marriage therapist that wrote about what was the primary cause of failed relationships. The primary cause of failed relationships was self-abandonment. Self-abandonment. Because self-abandonment leads to resentment, and resentment destroys love. And saying yes when the answer is truly no is absolute self-abandonment. And not only does it erode trust with our partner, but it erodes trust with ourselves. And that's even worse. So I can't say enough about telling the truth. And this was my client constructing the answers. And not only people do this not just on dates, but we do this in relationship. We do this in relationship where we think I want to keep the peace, which we're going to hear about here shortly. So I say what I think they want to hear. We can't trust, and eventually we resent. It doesn't work. All right, so now we've talked about preparation, we've talked about attraction. Now let's talk about relating and the mistakes that we make there. Oh, we think the opposite sex should behave the way we do. Now, we've talked about masculine and feminine, which are the energies. Then there is also male and female, and we are constructed biologically different. We have an entire DNA history of millions of years that have created the way that men and women show up, and it's different. We have very core similarities, but we also have huge differences. And if we think they should behave the way that we do, we are going to be set up for frustration, arguments, and a heartache. And when you actually start to understand the blessings of the differences between us, it will allow us to create harmony where there used to be anger and resentment. So, some of the ways this will show up is you're listening to your partner or your date and you think, why would they do that? I would never do that. Would you just stop? See, we make them wrong. And it's not an expression of love. It's actually the absence of love when we're trying to get them to do it our way. This shows up both with men and women during sex, but all of a sudden we feel this disconnection and we wonder what just happened or what did I do and so often it's because we're not actually recognizing the differences between us when it comes to sexuality. I could go on and on and on about the differences in communication, the differences in sexuality, the difference is in our needs, wants, and desires, our turn-ons, turn-offs. Literally, there are probably over 100 differences that when we really dive in and start to take this apart and recognize this, it sets us up for fun and joy instead of irritation and annoyance. If you are a woman that thinks you want to snag a sensitive new age guy, and then you complain when you get him. See, again, this is where I was talking about that man with the open heart. What can happen is that there's a whole lot of conditioning that men have said, I want to be sure that I am respectful of women. I don't want to be one of those guys. I want to make sure that she knows how kind I am. I've learned to bring my sensitive side. But again, I said this earlier, if it obscures, if it is at the expense of your masculine, it actually won't work. So you want to actually recognize what it is you are truly attracted to, and then be the partner that attracts that. Similarly, on the flip side, you want them to be more or less emotional. I had a gentleman that came to me and called me about potentially working together, and he was talking about what it is he desired in relationship. And he said, I want a completely sexually uninhibited woman. I want a woman who can freely express that sexuality. And I said, okay, great. And what I'm paying attention to when we express what we desire is we also need to know that we're going to show up as the partner who can meet that person. So I was paying attention to, so how does he show up? But then he continued and he said, but I don't want a woman that's emotional. And I went, bing, bing, bing. Because this is that belief system that we can have a woman who's sexually expressed and not emotional. Those two things go hand in hand. And I know a woman's emotions can scare men, but it's also really powerful when you learn how to be in that fullest expression of her feminine energy and that it doesn't intimidate you anymore. Guys, you can totally get it. It's absolutely possible. And what's really cool, men and women, is that eventually her emotions can be really sexy. I can tell you when I've been in tears, I can tell you when I've been pissed. I have had men say, "Oh my gosh, you're so sexy right now. You're so attractive. You're so beautiful." It really is when we can allow the differences between us. They can connect us and turn us on instead of turning us off. Same thing, emotional and rational. Will you just be a little more logical? Will you stop? Will you just get to the point? Ways to separate us. And will you get to the point or give me more details? This is another one that shows up in our communication. She wants details, he wants the point. But there's a beauty in how we actually share both of those and can actually meet each other. John Gray said it years ago. The men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We have two different languages, but we can actually translate. You thought love should be enough. See, we think that we fall in love, it's magical, we're connected, and that's just going to take us through the decades. It's a great starting point. But it's not enough to have love last. It's not enough to actually have soul love partnership. So, what we want here is to recognize that if your relationship is taking a backseat to life, it's never going to last. It has to be a priority. Love has to come first. If you're looking for happily ever after, yes, there is the idea of happily ever after, but not from the fantasy standpoint. It is the knowing that we are going to have challenges. We are going to go through ups and downs, and that happiness will be there along with the tears. And how do we be with that in a way that connects us? If you haven't talked about how your relationship is doing, or in your past relationships you didn't talk about how your relationship was doing, or you don't know what a relationship check-in is, you're probably making this mistake. We've got to pay attention to and tend to the garden of relationship. Or if you're single, very similarly, you didn't talk about how the relationship was going until you were having a breakup conversation. It is, we tend to and take care of the relationship all along the way. If you keep arguing about the unmet expectations where they're not doing things the way you thought they were going to do them, well, you think you have agreements that you didn't actually make. See, here, what I teach my long-term clients is how to have a conscious beginnings ritual, how to create heartfelt agreements that will actually carry you through all of the for better or for worse. But you got to have the conscious agreements. And to go back to the one about telling the truth, you've got to agree to what telling the truth actually means. Here's the conscious beginnings ritual that I spoke of. And if you get to the point in a relationship where you give up hope on certain things that are important to you, that is a sure sign that your relationship needs attention, that your partnership, that your partner, that you have something really important to talk about. And I want to go back here because I talked about the conscious beginnings ritual, and when we were talking about baggage, I said there's a way that you can clear that out. And it's something called a conscious endings ritual. And that conscious endings ritual is the way that if we should end a relationship, which can happen in soul love partnerships, how do we do that in a way that you don't have to actually do this with your partner, although you can do it together. But I've actually had clients go through conscious endings rituals for relationships that were over 20 years ago, I should say. And it is that completion that leaves the baggage behind and sets you up to come into the new relationship where you can create a conscious beginnings ritual that then will allow you not to pick up the baggage along the way. So these two things go hand in hand. So now If you've ever been one to lose yourself in relationship, if you stop doing the things that you enjoyed before you were in relationship, you are going to lose yourself. When you set you aside for the relationship, you get lost, and self-abandonment, remember, is the way to destroy a relationship. If you don't see your friends, you lose yourself. You lose what's important to you. You lose the juice and the attractiveness that brought you to the relationship in the first place. If a partner pulls away and you go grasping to pull them back, you'll do anything to try to get that connection strong again. That doing anything means that you're going to do something that isn't in alignment, that isn't congruent with your soul. And little by little, every time you do that, you disappear more and more in this relationship. And then it's like, who's actually here? And am I happy? And are we connected? You spend all your time together, or you want to, even if your partner isn't willing to spend all your time together. And it's all about the we. It's the we, it's the we, it's the we. And me gets lost. See, to have unity, you actually have to have sovereignty. To have divine connection, you have to have two authentic individual beings. Otherwise, it's a meshment. Otherwise, it is codependence. And that never works. Codependent and losing yourself in a relationship go hand in hand. If you don't know what makes you happy, you've lost sight of you. And that in and of itself will destroy the foundation of that relationship. We've talked about the better than nothing. That's losing what matters to you. We've talked about the priority. That's another way that you lose you. And if you are irritated and hurt when your needs aren't being met, again, self-abandonment, a way that you have set aside you. Because if you were asking for your needs, if you were standing for your needs, if you knew that your needs were important, and needs and needy are not the same thing. But if you know that your needs are important, then your needs will actually get met. Put a check mark if you made that one. If you avoid conflict, your relationship is likely going to end. See, we think that never having an argument is a sign of a great relationship. It's actually a sign that you're avoiding, and that there's going to be those things under the rug. If you'd rather shut up or stuff it and walk away rather than facing a potential upset or a conversation that might not go well, you are putting it under the rug, and you are going to end up in that space where, I don't know, I'm not in love anymore. I love you, but I'm not in love. You're my friend, but you're not my lover anymore. If the fuse gets shorter because you've been stuffing it, you've been tolerating it, and then all of a sudden you explode, well, one, you weren't being truthful. Two, you were trying to avoid the conflict, but now we got to get even bigger conflict. And those are sometimes tougher to come back from. Sarcasm goes up when we're avoiding conflict. If you hate conflict, I was a conflict hater. I was the peacemaker. As a matter of fact, when I got divorced back in my 20s, it was like I would get the question, well, aren't you mad? I'm like, no, I'm not mad. I don't get mad. I just get hurt, but I'm not mad. I should have told him how I felt. We talked about this. If you think not arguing is a sign of a strong relationship, it's actually the sign that you are in for some potential trouble. We've talked about keeping each other happy. See, what's interesting about these mistakes is we can look at them, and some of the same behaviors create different challenges in the relationship. But they all, when played out together, and I can tell you, I made every one of these mistakes. But when they play out together, the more and more of them that are playing, the more and more challenge the relationship. And it's so important that we know how to fight conscious style. Fighting conscious style means that we're still respecting and honoring and loving, but we're also really willing to be in the intensity of our challenges, in the fullness of our disagreements, in the depths of our hurts. So that what happens is that conflict, when we're willing to meet conflict, conflict actually becomes communion. The challenges and the upsets become connection and become communion. They strengthen and deepen the relationship. There was a gentleman who came without his partner to a workshop probably 10 years ago. And he learned this and he took it back and he shared it with her because he said, "Oh my God, we hate it when we fight. We think something's wrong with our relationship when we fight." And I had the chance to see them both together publicly a couple weeks later. She's like, "Oh my God, this has made the biggest difference in our relationship. We thought there was a problem, but now we actually know there's a strength." So, this is what's actually possible when you know how to fight conscious style, to navigate conflict into communion. And here's our last mistake: pleasure takes a backseat. See, sexuality, but not just sexuality. So often we think pleasure and we think sex. And yes, that's one of the expressions. But joy and dates and things that actually make you feel good, that make life worth living, there has to be space for that. Pleasure cannot take a back seat and have a relationship last. So if sex becomes an afterthought, that is a sure sign that you need to make space on your calendar for pleasure. If you don't know what sensuality really is, see, sensuality is the place where we get to feel the depths of ecstasy. We get to enjoy sex and lovemaking in a way that gets better and better and better. And the orgasms get longer and deeper. It's also where we enjoy the pleasure of touch. It's the place where we enjoy the pleasure of a kiss on an entirely new level. It's also the place where we can have the sensual pleasures of sound and music and nature and food and enjoy those together on the dates that you want to be taking all the time that you're in relationship, decades into marriage. Indulging in the self-care and the fun. And the self-care and the fun are going to look different for masculine and feminine. For masculine, it may be that there's that, like, I need to go indulge in this pleasure or this activity that juices me. While for the feminine, it might be that I want to indulge in the fuzzy blanket and the warm tea or the bath or the silk that we put on our bodies. So indulging, and that pleasure, oh, by the way, makes you attractive, lights you up, and makes you sexy. We want to be good at pleasuring ourselves. And that doesn't just mean sexuality, but that is one place. But bringing pleasure to you that you can then bring to the relationship. Vacations, weekend getaways, even a single night getaway. To have that pleasure is going to keep igniting that soul love partnership. Dating, you've got to continue to date even after you're in relationship. And flirting, it's that place where we show our signs of attraction. And flirting is not just, let me, give you a line, let me look at you a certain way. It's the place where we get to come home into, "Ooh, he's good." And there's ways that we can do that really simply and beautifully, but with so much attractive energy. So this is a moment, I know there's at least one person with their hand up, and I want to give us some space here for a moment to actually look back over the mistakes. And there's a space on your handout to actually total up how many of those mistakes that you've made. But then, even more importantly, is to take a moment and write down what those mistakes have cost you, what the impact of those mistakes have been. Again, not to blame, but to see why it's so important to now look at these next pieces where we're going to talk about, after the coaching, we're going to talk about the preparation, we're going to talk about the practices. So this is a time to just take a minute or two, and write down what you've learned here. And then if you've got a question, and I know, let's see, the person with their hand up, maybe put it back down because I don't see it now. And if there's any other questions, I will open up the line and actually do a little bit of coaching before we step into this. So I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm going to refill my water glass, and I will be right back. Take that moment, write it down, and if you've got questions, if you don't want to interact with me live, you can just type them into the chat window. But what comes up for you after those mistakes? And I will be right back. I'm going to drink another sip and fill this up, and we'll do the coaching and then jump on to the preparation steps. Okay. There we go. Let me pop over here. So I'm going to flip back on the last slide. Whoops, the backwards. There is the answer to that question, the bullet, and then I wondered, and I'm not sure why. I apologize. I'm hearing from one person that the audio is fading out once in a while, and I'm not sure why. I had a sense that that was happening, so thank you for confirming that. And I don't know what to do about it because there is absolutely nobody else on the network and nothing else going on. So it's not something I unfortunately have control over. If at any point that gets significant, will you somebody please put a note so that I can backtrack so that you can actually hear what I've said. So besides putting it onto the calendar, what are some of your suggestions to make sex not an afterthought? That's a big question, because one of the reasons that sex is, well, there's several reasons that sex can become an afterthought. And the reasons can be all the things that you haven't talked about, what you've put under that rug. It can also be that we don't value pleasure. So we need to have that conversation. It truly is a conversation. Well, I'm actually going to say it this way. It's an exploration individually. Why does it take a backseat for me? Now, I know the first thing that's going to come up is very often it takes a backseat for one partner and not the other. That is where, again, having the ability to have conscious, and that can be a conflict, that can be truly something that shows up or feels like conflict, how to have those conscious conversations and share the desire, and then listen and request from your partner what would create space for you, what would allow or invite or encourage or have you have desire. And kids can be a big deal in this. If somebody's exhausted, they're not going to want to have sex. So we might navigate when is a better time for us to have sex. It might be that we've had a partner that's less interested because we weren't being attentive to the differences between men and women. So, without knowing the exact context of what's creating sex as an afterthought, those are some of the ways that we want, or some of the things we should look at, and then some of the ways that we begin to navigate, not and negotiate, but being careful that we don't want to compromise, because compromise means that someone's losing. We want to work this out in a way that both people feel like they're winning, both people feel like they're getting the most out of this experience. They're both happy. That's what's really key. So let's see, I think there's one more. Oh, a great comment that I'm shocked that I have done all of these things. No wonder my relationships have not worked. You are so not alone. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your vulnerability and your authenticity to admit that. Because when we bring the unconscious conscious, when we look at and we're willing to take responsibility for our side of the fence, things always change. Always change. When we, it's hard to admit sometimes that we actually played a role. It is so much easier to go, they did this, they did that, they didn't do this, they were never. And it's incredibly disempowering. And oh, by the way, it means that you don't have any power to have anything be any different. But what I can guarantee you, because I work with individuals, I work with couples, but I also work with a lot of individuals whose partners are not interested in taking this journey. And there's an imagination that if your partner is not interested in taking this journey, that you can't take it either. But the truth is that when you shift, your relationship will shift. And what I see over and over again is that the partner starts going, oh, you're different. Oh, this is different. Oh, this, oh, wow, we're not arguing so much. Oh, we're having deeper conversations. My partner's doing things that they've never done for me before, but they're not doing the work. They're not walking the path consciously anyway. And so it truly is so powerful to admit, I had a role in this. And then you can do something about it. And everything changes in that moment. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And let me see if there's any, I have two different windows so they get on top of each other. Awesome. Perfect, you guys. All right, so let's see. There was one more note before. So there's a question, will you be able to see the slides again? There will be a link to the replay available for the next week. So you will be able to go back and rewatch and re-listen. So yes, that is available. All right, I'm going to mark these as answered. And okay. So we will have another spot later on where we can actually answer some more questions. So if you've got questions or comments as we go, again, please put them into the chat window, put them into the Q&A window. I will make one more comment before we move on. And that is that I often attract a narcissist perfectionist like my mom. So often we will attract the one that we need to actually move through and leave the baggage behind, to the one who is going to be the master button pusher, because that's what our soul love partner is. They are our master button pusher. And that is a blessing. But we have to be willing to let the buttons be pushed until we release whatever it is that needs to be released. And we can, maybe that relationship will last. Maybe it was here to teach us something so that we can then have a more powerful relationship in the future. So that is very, very, very common, that we attract the same kind of person over and over again. And once we, again, take that power to walk our path of soul love, to activate it within ourselves, to open it up within ourselves, at that point, then we can attract a partner that can take our souls. Soul love partnership is about both souls evolving into something that is the fullest expression of both people's souls. So, I am going to come back to the question about personality profiles and chemistry.com later. So let's keep going. And we're now going to talk about this journey of soul love. What does it look like? How do we walk it? And I want to talk about sacred love for a moment. And this sacred love is not something that is logical or reasonable. It's actually not even something that's definable. It's not focused on the personal qualities, and it's definitely not all about chemistry, but it is authentic and intimate and ecstatic. I said earlier, it is profound and wordless and breathless. It is a practice and it is a commitment. It unites soul, heart, and body. And it is who you truly are. It is not something that you find. It is something that you are, and then you share it with another who is this love, and you ignite an experience of romantic love that is that wordless, breathless experience. And this path, it has three phases to it, three parts of the journey. And we're going to dive into these parts. And then you're going to see what happens in each of these phases of the journey. So, this journey is really one where heart and sex unite and spirit leads. Here's the basics of it. There's you showing up in your wholeness, your completeness, your enoughness. And oh, by the way, there is no question you are enough, you are complete, you deserve love. But we need to get you to knowing that. And then two whole beings, not you completely complete me like the movies say, but two whole beings coming into relating and partnership. And then we can have union. Then we have the infinite love that keeps expanding and deepening. It is an unfolding of love. It is, and what the first phase is what I call ecstatic authenticity, where it is this self-love. It is the relationship with self. It is where we are willing to be seen in our greatness and our not so greatness, in the strength and in the vulnerability. And that makes us available for love. If we are trying to hide and pretend, we are not available for love. Then we get to the ecstatic intimacy. And the ecstatic intimacy is where we're experiencing this romantic love, where we are seeing each other and where partnership gets its foundation. And that can be spiritual partnership for those that are called on that spiritual journey. And then it is also the ecstatic ecstasy, the divine love, the unconditional love, the mutual seeing. And for those that are on a spiritual path, it's actually a path of awakening. So let's go deeper with that. I said it's two souls evolving. So an evolution of your soul. Ecstatic authenticity, and let me define that for you. Ecstatic authenticity means that you know who you are fully and completely. You know who you are so fully and completely that you are absolutely willing to express yourself in that greatness and not so greatness. And where you like you so much that you don't want to be anything but you for anybody or for any reason, where you're no longer willing to sell yourself out, twist yourself into a pretzel, or settle for anybody or anything. And that's where it gets powerful. That's where it gets sexy. We all have the light and the shadow. So it's a union of that light and shadow within you, bringing you wholly and fully to relationship. Maybe you've heard this before, but intimacy, into me you see, But before we can get to into me, you see, it has to be into me, I see. Into me, I see. I am willing to go inside and see myself, to know my needs, wants, desires, turn ons, and share them with you and let you see the parts of me that maybe I wanted to hide before. It is sacred you. It is sacred me. It is knowing that you are precious and priceless. That's really what sacred is that we hold it with reverence and devotion and treasure, that it is priceless. So then we get to ecstatic intimacy. It is the union of self and other. Into me you see. I see into your soul, you see into my soul. I see into your greatness, you see into my greatness. I see into your not so greatness, you see into my not so greatness. And the other becomes sacred. In ecstatic ecstasy, it's the union of human and divine. We are both. And to get to divine union, that where does one begin and the other end? It's embracing our divinity and our humanity. We fall in love with our humanness, and that brings us into this full expression of soul. It is into me you are union. And everything is sacred. Our conflict is sacred. Our joy is sacred. Our sex is sacred. Our love is sacred. Life is sacred. And it is a full expression of soul love. And what it looks like when we come into that full expression of soul love, in the ecstatic authenticity experience, in the self experience, there is self acceptance, self respect, worthiness, deserving, lovable. And oh, by the way, when you get into an ecstatically authentic relationship with you, you do not need to go find confidence. So many people will come and say, I want to find my confidence. Well, when you get into a relationship with you, confidence is a byproduct. You don't have to find it anymore. And let me back up. At this moment, right here, when you respect you, when you honor you, when you are willing to be seen in your good and your not so good, that is when you actually become available for love. Because until you let yourself fully be seen, you will never actually trust love. Like, oh, if they knew that part of me, oh, if I do that, they might leave. But we can actually trust when you bring yourself fully to the intimacy. So here, we both come into this space of mutual respect, knowing that we are enough. There's cherishing and accepting and respect and honor and embracing the wholeness of both individuals and the relationship. And then we come into treasuring, union, oneness, worship, not in an odd sort of way, but that I see the divine in you. I see your soul. I see your preciousness, and I hold you as an absolute treasure. What would it be like if you held your relationship and your partner as sacred? Would you show up differently? I'd say so. So here's the problem, though. In every one of these phases, we've got limited consciousness. We've got the internal barriers. We've got the ways that we try to avoid. We've got the strategies that we try to use. And they show up in all four phases. And we don't have nearly enough time to dive into this. But what I wanted to share with you is that we have to clear out this limited consciousness. We have to, if you're trying to make sure you never get rejected, there's no way you're ever going to find soul partnership. If we try to avoid abandonment, we can't be authentic. And we know already that if we can't be authentic, then we have to self-abandon, which means we're going to struggle in the relationship. Expectations and judgments can get in the way. So we have to clear this out so that love can really live. And this is what gets interesting, is remember that we talked about the individual and the two partners. Well, Both people have their stuff. Both people have their baggage. Both people have their conditioning. Both people have their hurts. And so now we've got two people trying to navigate this together without the skills to know how to do it. And so then we get into soul purpose of relationship. And one of the ways to look at this, just to give you an introduction to this, is that if one person is here and they're working on coming into this authenticity, and the other person is out here stepping into their ecstasy, this can work. And there has to be a lot of consciousness because you're here to evolve each other's souls. And so being conscious that you're in different places on this journey, not right or wrong. And then it gets interesting when, if we move then to the next slide here, notice here the two people, they overlap. They're not in exactly the same place on this path of soul love, but there's a huge overlap, and the power and the potency to move through and help each other and support each other to move through these challenges so that you can again step into the fuller expression of love. There's always more available. So that's how we begin to look at and identify soul purpose of relationship. At a high level, it is to evolve our souls. And then we can look at where each person is on the journey and what are we evolving with and into with each other. So this is a journey. It is not a destination. It doesn't get complete because we're going to keep opening and opening and opening into bigger and bigger expressions of love, bigger and bigger expressions of pleasure and ecstasy. And so it always deepens. It always gets better if we're willing to keep walking the path. Deeper and deeper, more and more ecstatic. But how? So here's where we're going to start looking at specifically the steps that I have taken men and women, individuals and couples on this path. This is some of the content that I have not shared with anyone ever before in outside of the deeper program work that I hold. So we're going to do this in the two phases. We're going to look at that ecstatic authenticity phase, the being phase, the how am I showing up phase. And this is where we're going to talk about the 8 requirements that you truly have to meet to be prepared to be a soul love partner. And where we stop blaming and we get the power to actually really change the way you're experiencing love. The first one has to do with that masculine and feminine dynamic, to get into alignment. And when you get into alignment, when you be who you are and ignite that spark, it is that attractive essence. And not only is it attractive, just so you know, not only is it attractive in relationship, it's actually attractive in every area of life. If we are attracting clients, if we want to attract support, if we want to attract a new job, like this essence, when you align with you, you light up. And that it's like that, oh, who is that? And people take notice, male or female. Who is that? And we're drawn to them. So we want to ignite that. And in this step, what's important is, I said earlier, you want to get exactly clear on what that essence is for you. And are you predominantly masculine or are you predominantly feminine? And then, like me, what happens is we want to see then, how are we actually showing up in life? And usually probably 95% of the men and women that I work with, there's a big gap. And there was for me, there was a huge gap. I was showing up so masculine, and yet I was so very feminine. And so what we need to do is close that gap so that how you're showing up is actually your authentic expression. And that's what reignites the spark and the chemistry, or has you attract, where I couldn't attract the men that I was attracted to. Now I can attract the ones that I am attracted to. Radically self-aware. You cannot offer yourself into me, you see, And you can't not self-abandon, you can't self-honor without being radically self-aware. So what's key here is one of the ways that I invite people to do this is there's something called the diamond of sacred you. And that diamond of sacred you at the lower point of that diamond is where we're somewhat unconscious of self, or even in a self-denial, where we're at the bottom of that priority list. And what we need to do is move up, quote unquote, the rungs of, if that diamond were also a ladder, climb up that from a space of self-acknowledgement and self-awareness, and then self-acceptance, and then self-respect, and then self expression, and then self love. And then, if we're climbing all the way up into what might be called self actualization, the fullest expression of who you are and why you're on this planet. And that, when you know yourself on that level, the power, when two people come together sharing authentically, you can fall in soul to soul. Another piece is we talked a lot about trust. If there isn't trust of self, there can't be trust of other. Let me say that again. If there isn't trust of self, there cannot be trust of others. So often we want to trust somebody else. But in order to trust that person, we have to trust ourselves. And so in order to build trust within ourselves, we have to understand and know our own inner guidance system and how to listen to it. And clear out the things that numb or make us not be able to hear that inner guidance, to clear out the things that say, I can't have it. So this is when you get in touch and you know how to work with your own inner guidance system, you get the trust and you get the confidence. Then you want to honor the real you. We've talked about self-abandonment. So you know your inner guidance system, you, now you have to honor you. And this is where it now steps into the expression, the willingness to share what you don't want to share, the willingness to tell the truth when you're afraid it might cause upset. But trying to protect them from upset will never actually strengthen the relationship. But being kind and loving and knowing how to express that can, again, as I've said before, create that connection and that depth. You got to understand the opposite sex. I said earlier, the communication and sexuality differences. I have 50 on here, but I am positive that if I sat down and started writing a list, I could come up with 100. There's a needs model. The 3 core needs of men, the 3 core needs of women, that when we understand our needs, that we can look at that model and it will explain every single upset. When we can see either I have a need that's not being met or they have a need that's not being met. And more often than not, we both have needs that are not being met. And that allows us, when we stop thinking that they're so annoying when they do that, what's interesting is that the very thing that annoys us is also the thing that is sexy. That's where I was talking about the sexual expression is the emotional expression, where that presence in the masculine, like, it can annoy a feminine woman that he's so focused on that computer or so focused on the book or so focused on the TV that they don't even know that we walked into the room, or they didn't even hear us when we spoke. But when they take that and they turn that attention and it's riveted on us, that's sexy. It's the same energy, it's the same expression, but experienced in 2 different ways. So we need to understand so that we can celebrate rather than be frustrated by the opposite sex. Now, that is in the preparing, because you've got to understand this, because then you're going to understand the dynamics of attraction. And it also helps you understand yourself, because sometimes through looking at the differences, we actually get more clarity about our own journey. The environment. This has to do with making space. It has to do with the internal environment and the external environment. So you want to clear out that baggage. You want to do those conscious endings rituals. You want to forgive. You want to be able to send blessings. Because if there is any bitterness or any resentment or any emotional trigger, let's put it this way, anything other than neutral emotion with something that's happened in the past, that is sitting in the environment of either trying to attract or build love right now. And we need to clear that out. That opens up space. That allows the inner environment to take love to the next level, to receive it and to give it. This also goes to where I mentioned earlier, creating space in your nightstands, creating space in your home, and creating space in your calendar. All of that sets the foundation of partnership. And this is an individual piece. Again, we can say, oh, we have to do this together. It takes each individual choosing to create space. Now, that's not to say, reminder, one person in a relationship can changing themselves changes the relationship always. So you can't even though I say both people choosing it, you start. That's what's important. And then we set the stage. And part of how we set the stage is we talk about those relationship values. We talk about our personal values. We talk about the long-term vision. We talk about our fears. We talk about the things that really excite us. And then we come together and we create a set of agreements. We create a context that we will have relationship check-ins, that we will share with each other. This is what sets a relationship up to last. That this plays to where we think love is enough. This is how you counter that mistake. You set the stage, and you have to know what you want in your relationship agreements, what's important for each partner, and then bringing that into the united set of agreements. And then the ecstasy of sacred sensuality. I love this one. We feel and experience love in our bodies. We know we're in love by the sensations that happen in our bodies. Our sexual loving, it is through the sensations that we have in our bodies. It is the sense and the curves and the lines and the sounds, our own and our partners, that ignite. Whoa, what was that? Oh my gosh, I didn't know it could be like that. Where did we just go? What just happened? Oh my gosh. Even the tears of the depth of connection. And I can tell you, I have seen so many men who are willing to have the tears of love. Wow, this was so deep. This was so powerful. So for any women that don't believe that men can go deep, which was my belief, they can. And it is the experience of letting yourself feel the fullness. And so sensuality can sometimes be associated with femininity. Masculine men, you can absolutely learn to feel it in your body and create even more of it in hers. But you've got to be able to feel. And there's also an aspect of our emotions that we feel that allows us to connect, which, by the way, emotions are the language of intimacy. Emotions are the language of intimacy. It is where we connect. Into me you see, into me you are. And emotions are also part of our conflicts. So how we navigate our own emotions and our partner's emotions, the emotional experience, the emotional intelligence, it's not an intellectual thing, but an emotional embodiment. that again allows that love to go deeper and deeper. So these are some of the ways that, not some of the ways, these are the 8 essential must things to set you up. And this is one of my past clients. Michael was the client, and he talked about that there were so many amazing synchronicities, and he was determined not to settle for anything in his life. He took ecstatic authenticity so to heart and absolutely made that essential as he started into this next relationship, or as he started into his dating journey, and shortly thereafter attracted his beloved and saying, now we're writing our own story. And it is that they now consider themselves twin flames. The idea that you must bring you fully is what allows that depth of connection. Male and female, masculine and feminine. The strength of the relationship with you, the strength of the relationship with another depends directly on the strength of the relationship with you. You must have a relationship with you, strong relationship with you, because it's actually the strength of a relationship with another is limited. This is an even better way to say it, is limited. There's a cap on how strong that relationship can be based on how strong this relationship is. So if you want this relationship stronger, you've got to strengthen this. And that's the essence of those preparation steps. So now let's talk about phase 2. And I'm going to have us pause again here because we're now going to go into the next piece, but take a moment. You've got a spot on your worksheet to fill in, and you are filling in, make a note at the bottom there or in your journal, wherever you're writing. What do you notice about your own life? What do you notice about what you did do to prepare and what you didn't do to prepare? And then I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to write that down. And then we're going to go into the second part and what you want to be practicing in the relating. So take that moment and reflect back on how you've been in relationship with you and how much you've done to prepare. And I'll just be quiet for a moment or two and allow you guys to do that. I'm just double checking the boxes. So there are a couple of questions there, and I will come back to those in a little bit. Okay, so now that you've started to reflect on that part of your journey, let's go into the second part, the ecstatic intimacy, where we are truly bonding heart to heart, body to body, soul to soul, where it continues to take you to a level of intimacy and love that is beyond what you've ever imagined before. And truly, when I say that, I am not kidding. And I'll share a couple more stories as we go. But even if I just speak from my own personal experience, I couldn't have imagined the experiences that I now get to share. We don't know where we haven't been. We dream about what's possible, but it's even better than that because our imagination and our dreams are based on what we've experienced or what we've seen. But there's more beyond that. So let's talk about how partnerships that last use what people do to deepen and maintain that connection. And the first one is that there's a uniting of the light and the shadow in both people. there's a reflective mirror when we come into soul love partnership. One of the questions earlier was that I keep attracting the same kind of people. Well, what's also true is that anything that you see in another person is a reflection of something in you. So when we admire someone, what we're admiring in them is actually in us, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. It's an invitation to see more of ourselves. So this reflection that shows up in relationship. When something irritates us about another person, it's also a reflection of something in us. Now, sometimes it's that they do something that we actually do, but we try to be in denial that we do it. Sometimes it is that they do something that we wish we would do. And I'll give you an example of that one. Years ago, when I was married in my 20s, and my ex-husband would ask me every night when we went to sleep, he would ask, "Would you rub my back?" And in the beginning, of course, of course, of course. Well, after a year or so, I'm like, he never rubs my back. Well, part of the mirror, the opportunity, the reflection here is that I get to go, well, why am I so upset? Why am I bothered that he's asking me and I'm feeling this resentment? Like at that point, it was resentment. And it was, oh, well, he'll ask for a back rub and I won't. I'm not willing to ask for what I want. So he's my teacher. So I said, master button pusher, they're also our soul teachers. Our soul mates are here to evolve our souls. They're going to show us what we need to be more of ourselves. So we get to dance in this exploration where both people get to have more because of it. So that's the first practice. I'm willing to look at myself through our relationship. The second practice is pleasuring you. We talked about the importance of pleasure. And yes, in bed, absolutely, but also out of bed to learn what brings pleasure through your body, what creates joy, and being willing to open up that capacity within you to share it, pleasuring each other in bed and out. And that expands. Self-expression, expressing you soulfully. This is where, so I was talking about, we're climbing that diamond of sacred you to come up to a space of, because we can't express ourselves if we're in denial of our needs, wants, desires. We can't express ourselves if we actually don't accept that, oh, I don't like the fact that I need that, or I had judgments that I was going to be an inconvenience if I asked for something. So if I don't accept or respect my own needs, there's no way I'm going to express them. And oh, by the way, when you express you, it is so attractive. We fall in love with authenticity. We don't fall in love with perfection. We fall in love with the humanness. So, and that keeps happening over and over and over again. We fall in love with the humanness. So this is where it's so important to bring you, because that's what they fall in love with. And that's what they stay in love with. And that's what they get deeper in love with. We keep falling in love over and over and over again. It's better and better every year. Communicating from sacred intimacy. We need to move beyond the intimacy comfort zones. What we've talked about, what we've been willing to share, the level of vulnerability that we've been willing to allow. See, vulnerability is power. And to be authentic, we have to be vulnerable because someone may not like it. But if we have that ecstatic authenticity and we have that confidence, if they don't like it, it's actually a blessing. Like rejection actually becomes a blessing because we're not going down a path that's not going to be for us. And we're willing to be like, into me you see has to, it is rooted on, it requires vulnerability. And again, that is where emotions are the language of intimacy. We get to see each other fully, experience each other fully, celebrate each other fully. And this is the space of trust. Again, we trust each other to communicate. So then we want to embrace sacred conflict. And it is sacred. It is sacred. It is to be able to navigate conflict is one of the greatest gifts that it is the only way that we will actually be able to last through the ups and downs of love. It's that simple. We have to embrace it. We have to not just embrace it, we have to practice it. And here's what, there was another gentleman who he stepped into this journey of soul love and his wife didn't. And I just loved what he said. After learning about sacred conflict, I no longer fear getting into an argument with my wife. We've had a few good ones since then, but as we've come through them, my understanding and love for her deepens. We are bound together even more tightly than before. My understanding and love for her deepens because he started to embrace conflict and he ran from it. He shut down emotions. He would do anything to not have to deal with her upset. And his understanding and love for her deepens, bound more together, tightly together. This is so powerful. Can't say enough. Now, to embrace sacred conflict, we have to know, like, we're going to get triggered. When I say triggered, for anybody that doesn't know that word, it's something, we get irritated, something stirred up, we're hurt, we're angry, we want to shut down, we want to pull away. We make up stories. Like, things happen, and what we do as human beings is we give them meaning. So he does or doesn't do something. She says something. She expresses something, and we inherently start to make up stories. And 99% of the time, those stories are not true. So how do we work with this innate aspect of storytelling? Well, we get real with our stories, and then we learn and we communicate the meaning so that we can actually have a real conversation. And it dissolves the upsets. So this skill, navigating how to work with the stories, takes away the saboteurs that destroy love and strengthens that relationship, deepens the union, strengthens the union. But reaction's going to happen. Upset's going to happen. We're going to make up stories. And almost all of us are going to have some kind of sabotaging behavior that we do trying to protect ourselves. And so it's key to consciously work with your reactions, your stories, and the unconscious ways that we can try to sabotage things. And when we do that, the strength comes, the bond deepens. Then we want to know how to maintain that intimacy, know how to keep taking it deeper every single moment. And couples, moment one is right now. We can clean up the past, but right now, what do you do? And how do you communicate it? And so this is the key of then putting into practice the check-ins, the cleanups, the clearings that allow you, again, to fall in love over and over and over again. And then to walk this path, whether it's spiritual or soulful or simply the path of love, to keep walking it. Remember earlier I said, it's not a destination, it's a journey. That love can go deeper and deeper and deeper. The ecstasy can get more ecstatic. We can have more and more frequent and deeper experiences of, wow, what was that? Oh, I so love you. When we commit to walking the path. And it doesn't have to be one of the things that can come up is, oh my gosh, it's all work. No. But yes, anything. If we didn't maintain our house, it would lose its value. If we don't maintain our relationship, it loses its value. If you don't take care of your body, it lets you down. If you don't take care of your relationship, it's going to let you down. So, does it take some work? It does. Does it have to be all work? Absolutely not. And the more of this that you integrate, the less work it is and the faster those conflicts end. When you start to take this sacred approach, conflicts end so much faster with such better results. But we have to choose to stay on the path. And then we get to take a day off now and then. Because what I'm trying to say is there's nothing to be intimidated by, because when you actually put the extra effort in, you don't have to deal with all the stuff that you used to have to deal with in terms of the silent treatment or the shutdown or the pull away or the hurt or not knowing how to express it or should I express it. It becomes conscious, soulful relating. My husband and I have truly reached a new level of intimacy, respect, and honesty in our relationship. It opened my eyes to the work that needs to be done personally and within relationship. Ecstatic authenticity, ecstatic intimacy. It is key that we do both, and it creates the connection, the love, the intimacy that is even better than what we thought. When the divine masculine and feminine reveal both power and vulnerability, souls find their bond. Two whole people with our messy human fallibility coming together and allowing all of it to exist. Union, union. So phase 3, ecstatic ecstasy. Let me pause there. Take a moment, write on the bottom of your worksheet or in your journal, what do you notice about that second phase, the ecstatic intimacy, and the practices? How have you related to those? How have you not related to those? Take a moment, write that down, and then we're going to talk about phase 3. So phase 3, ecstatic authenticity and ecstatic intimacy married together creates ecstatic ecstasy. And here's the thing. I'm just going to give you a glimpse of this because, as I said, you actually can't fully grasp what ecstatic ecstasy is right now. It's what every single human being wants. It's what every person that comes to me on some level, they are trying to get to the ecstasy. But the prerequisites, the authenticity and the intimacy aren't there. But when we take that glimpse into the ecstatic ecstasy, it is the place where, again, we connect in a place of reverence and devotion and oneness. It is where we are fulfilled, like the relationship and the love in the love making. All of it is so fulfilling that we feel so complete that we know we are living life to that fullest. There's that idea that on the deathbed, it's not what we accomplished that we think back on. It's who we've loved and how we've loved. And the regrets that show up there are where we didn't fully love, where we didn't fully experience all that was possible. And when we actually take this path and come into that ecstasy, there can be no regrets. It's the life and the love fully lived in every way that you've imagined and even more. So again, this path, this journey, self, relating, other, authenticity, intimacy, ecstasy, one step at a time, coming back to and reminding us, let's take this deeper. Ecstatic authenticity, into me I see. The experience of that, the way that we create that is to activate the soul love within you, because this love is right here and you bring it to relationship. You bring it to relationship. You don't get it from relationship. That is the outdated model that this is going to give me something. No, I am bringing this and something much bigger ignites. So activating soul love within you. That then allows the into me you see, the loving soul to soul. It is that soul to soul loving that ignites and deepens and strengthens that bond forever. Then and only then do we get to the ecstatic ecstasy. And it is the into me you are, the union, living and loving. This is the whole of life, the whole of life being ecstatic, opening into that fullness. And that truly, it is this, as we create this, there's some really important ingredients that create the transformation to live in this, in each individual, whether you're looking for your partner or you're married to them. The transformation that creates this within you has really key elements. And those elements are, you have to embody it. You cannot think this. You cannot get insight and information and have that turn into transformation. The insight doesn't create it. It simply sets you aside. How do I want to say this? You, the embodiment of it, not the understanding of it, but the living of it, is what changes your attractiveness, what changes your relationship. So getting it in your cells. It's also community. Like, we got to talk about this. We have to see each other. We have to practice, especially being able to practice with somebody that isn't the one that you want to fall in love with. Like, how do I practice this with friends or others that are on this journey, committed to soul love, so that I can see and learn and have the reflections of, oh, that was your feminine so lit up. Or, ooh, I couldn't feel her. Or, oh, I feel you pulling away. So an environment of community is going to be really, really, really supportive of you. The other thing is, and I said support, it is where sometimes we doubt, sometimes we lose sight of what's actually possible. We lose sight of who we are. We doubt. And to be reminded that you actually have everything that you need, that you have the heart and the soul of the soulful lover, and that to support yourself, to be supported, and then also to create a dynamic of support. Immersing yourself in this journey. Again, so often we want to understand it and we think understanding it is going to do it. We have to live it. You have to immerse yourself in the experience so that you can make distinction after distinction after distinction, so that you can feel emotions. Our society so conditions us not to feel. But I've said multiple times in this journey that emotions are the language of intimacy. They are the bond. They are also the barometer of your soul. So as you're building the ecstatic authenticity, your emotions are actually showing you where you're out of alignment with yourself. So we've got to live this. And part of living it is to learn to feel. So immersing yourself in the experience and the opportunities to to embody. It really, the immersion brings us back to the embodiment. And again, in your cells where you don't have to think about it anymore, you don't need checklists. But one of the things that can be useful is reminders like you're getting here, the lists of things, the practices, the reminders, and even more. But that marry the embodiment with the support and the community and immersing yourself in it, and you open up the path for you. The greatest love of my life. This is another past client who shared, and that I love this. Actually, this is a current client. This was so fun. I spent the last 6 months clearing beliefs and letting go of my own stories about dating, love, and relationships, trying to identify and break my old patterns. What we've been talking about, we got to clear this out. And she said, all of a sudden, I've got this relationship that feels like a relationship that I had when I was 16 years old. And she had this aha. Oh, at 16, I didn't have all these hurts. I didn't have all these stories. I didn't have all these fears. And in the meantime, she'd actually kind of gotten a little oh, what's the word? Sarcastic almost about romance and movies and songs, and all of a sudden they all meant something again because she was available on a level that she'd never been available before. And of course, she drew in her partner, and they're learning to fight in different ways. They're learning to navigate the ups and downs and the enormous shift for her in a year. And she loves to say it's almost like this, the things that I've been sharing with you here are like the guidebook or the spell book. This is where the magic of love and relationship happens. So it's following the steps, it's walking the path, and you can have this. You can have it if you walk the steps, if you take responsibility. And it is one step at a time. One step at a time. I will say all the time, if you take one small step after one small step after one small step, you will go so far so fast. So you're being invited as you write things down to look at what's next for you. How do you step forward on your path? And we can be scared, scared. And the scared doesn't have to stop us. We can take small steps. I'm not talking about leaping right now, because so often when you leap, you actually end up going backwards. Now, there's an aspect of leaping that is totally powerful. It's like choosing it. I can think of so many times the word decision means to cut off all other options. And so we have to decide that we're going to do something. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about sports or we're talking about health or we're talking about going for a new position or choosing to step into the path of love, where we know we're going to move through all these different experiences. But it's that choice. So that's the leap. The leap is the choice. Then as we start to walk it, we just take one bite at a time, one step at a time on that path. And that's where you open up to the possibilities that you didn't know were there before. And I started to talk about the fear, and so like here, that you want this. The part of you that clicked the link to register and then clicked the link to get here or to listen to this, that's the part of you that wants to step forward. That's the part of you that knows you are capable. That's the part of you that knows you deserve it. And then there's the other parts. There's the part that says, I'm not so sure, because we can have the part that got you here, and then we can have the part that's been wanting this for a long time, but actually hasn't stepped out of that comfort zone to get what you really want. So let's be real about what got you here and then what can hold you back from actually having what you truly desire. And there's several things. And the fear, like, some people think that we should ignore the fear, or if the fear's there, we shouldn't do it. The fear is actually the biggest indicator that we should do it. And I'm not a fan of the word should, but it's the invitation. When the fear shows up, your soul is saying, I want this. And you can have it. So we don't try to make the fear go away. We embrace the fear, just like every other emotion. They're all valid. And if you embrace that fear, what's really cool is what you look at disappears. If you resist it, it persists. So if you fight the fear is going to win. But if you embrace the fear, you can actually move with the fear. And fear and excitement are actually two sides of that same coin. So you open into the possibility that wasn't available when you were fighting the fear. You're not sure it's worth it. Like, it's where I was talking a little bit ago of like, I don't know. This is like, it hasn't worked in the past. It hurts. I've been through this. I've been through the heartache. I just want to give up. And yet you're listening to this. That part of you knows that it's worth it. And I can tell you, you have what it takes because you're sitting here. Similar to that, when you've lost hope, I don't know. I can't do it. I'm not capable of this. I, oh, I will tell you a story about another woman, but this reminds me of her, is that maybe I'm just not cut out for this. I think I'm just supposed to accept that I'm supposed to be single the rest of my life. That's losing hope. And it's not true. You don't know. I don't believe in myself. I don't trust myself. I'm not sure that I can actually do this. I guarantee you, you didn't get the training to do this. I didn't get the training to do this. None of us got the training to do this, but we all have it in us because this love is who we are. It is who we are, and you have it in you. You just need to know how. And you're learning. You're here learning. That idea that I've tried all of this and it's just going to be the same again, that is hodgepodge, because you are not the same person sitting in this moment that you were when you did those other things. You are different now. And I can tell you, there were things that I had to do 2 and 3 and 4 times before it finally went, oh, that's what that means. Or I'm trying to learn something and figure something out. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that connects with that, connects with that. We needed every single thing we've been through to get to the next step. Every one of those steps was necessary for you to be here right now and take the next step. And so this idea that it's going to be the same again is just a way to keep you from taking the next step. And many spiritual teachers will actually tell you that it is when you are about to give up that is when that breakthrough is about to happen. And that is in any area of life, and equally so in love and relationships. But when you're going to give up is when the breakthrough is going to happen. If you've quit, you've started down some path, whether it was a health path or a sports path or any path, hobby, love, and you quit. Same thing as the one before, really, is even though we've quit, we don't have to quit again. And you're not the same person that quit before. You have more. Inherently, you've stepped forward. And every one of my relationships taught me something. Every one that broke up made relationship possible now. They were my teachers. So you needed it all. And this is the one, actually, these next two are the two number one reasons that people stop themselves from having the love that they want. And that is that you don't trust you. And you not trusting you, you can change that by getting into relationship with you. But if you don't trust you, there's no way that you can do this without getting that trust back. And you can get the trust back, because I didn't trust myself, and half the people that I work with don't trust themselves. I know that can be shifted, but it takes building the relationship with you, because all the times that you abandon you, no wonder you don't trust you. All the times that you abandoned you, no wonder you don't trust you. and you don't believe that you have the resources or know where to find the resources, but they're available to you. So I invite you to trust you. I've never known a love like this. This woman, like, let me put reality to what I just said about losing hope and not trusting herself. This woman came to me last January, and on our first conversation, she very quickly said, I don't feel like I'm cut out for a relationship. I just feel like I need to admit that I'm not meant for love, that I'm supposed to be one of those people that walks a single celibate path. And yet she was having this conversation with me. Fast forward a year, less than a year, actually, December, she's married, very happily married. She said in that she found the hope in that first conversation. Oh my gosh, there is something here that I didn't even know was in me. And the love that I have now is a love I have never known like this before. It's a level of love and intimacy that I feel people dream of, where I said, we dream about it, but we're not actually sure we can have it. She dreamed about it, and now she lives it. Miracle after miracle down that path has led her to be in an ecstatic ecstasy relationship with her beloved. So, soul partnership. We're going to keep you, how do I want to say this? You're being in relationship, everything that you've written down, everything that you've journaled about, all of this is to have you taking these first steps to building this relationship with you so that you can build a soul partnership. So keep being in relationship with you. Keep considering, what are you committed to? What are you willing to do as a next step? Because that's so important for you to know, for you to honor. And with that exploration of you, let's reflect on some of these partnership qualities. And then we're going to get into the qualities of soul sex, which are inherently part of a soul partnership. So souls evolve. We've talked about that. Each person comes into a fuller expression of themselves. We mirror each other in that truth and in that shadow. Again, through the master button pusher, through the reflective mirror, I get to see more of me. You get to see more of you, and we get to share more love. I don't need to say master button pusher again. We embrace conflict, and the conflict becomes communion. There's a shared vision. There's a soul purpose for our relationship. And we have those heartfelt agreements. We create a conscious beginnings ritual. We set that foundation that we bring the love. It's ignited. Now, how are we maintaining it and deepening it over time? Vulnerability, authenticity. Intimacy requires authenticity, and authenticity requires vulnerability. And we fall in love in the vulnerability, not the perfection, but the vulnerability and the courage to let ourselves be seen for all of who we are. You make a commitment to you and then to the relationship. You make a commitment to you and then to the relationship. Remember, the strength of the relationship with you determines the strength of a relationship with another. And it is love. The partnership is love. Two individuals as love create a partnership that is love. Three separate entities that all need to exist to have the union that we call divine union. And it excites you and it scares you. And sometimes you want to keep diving in, and sometimes you want to pull away. But in those moments when we want to pull away, when we breathe, when we pause, when we reflect back on, I can trust me. We reflect back on, actually, I'm meant to love. I may not know how, but I'm figuring it out as we go and I'm willing to learn. So it excites you and it scares you. The qualities of soul sex and soul sex, where heart and sex unite and spirit leads. What do they look like? They're going to look a lot like the things that we've talked about, but let's get even more specific. It's sacred. It is a privilege to get to take our clothes off and touch this body. It is a privilege to get to witness this body. It is a privilege to get to witness the pleasure, to contribute to the pleasure, to receive the pleasure, to honor that with the highest regard. So it is sacred. It is sensual. To really have soul sex, we have to develop our capacity for sensuality, both received and experienced and shared. It's subtle. It's subtle, it's subtle, it's subtle. Some of the most extraordinary orgasms that I've had have been what would appear to be stillness. But see, we have energetic bodies. And it's not just what the bodies are doing. It's not what the physicality is doing, whether that's a touch, whether that's intercourse, whether that is kissing. It's more than that. It's the energy body that is also making love. And that is subtle. So those orgasms in stillness, because it was energy. And it's extraordinary. It's slow. We are so conditioned that sex is fast and it's friction. When it's friction, when it's fast, we actually cannot feel. Fast is the enemy of ecstasy. So we're slowing down to feel more. We're slowing down to experience more. Into me you see, into me you are. I mentioned stillness, that presence. We can fall in, and the bodies do so much more. Surrendered, masculine or feminine, that tends to be a more feminine word. But in order to have orgasm, we have to surrender into the pleasure. And more often that comes more easily for the masculine, for a male, but not always. And then feminine, deepening into the fullness of orgasm. We have to be able to surrender into that pleasure and allow it to fully move through us, to experience the depths of pleasure and orgasm that are actually available to our bodies. It's succulent, it's juicy, it is that thing that just we want to fall into. So we've got soul sex, but there's some really key ways that we sabotage and undermine it. And the ways that we sabotage and undermine it are, for the men, sabotaging. There's no variety. I mentioned this earlier. If we get into routine, she shuts down. She numbs out. She can't feel in that. So we are wanting to create experiences and ways of being with each other that invite that variety, that keeps igniting the pleasure higher and higher and higher. And what worked yesterday isn't going to work tomorrow, probably, or what worked yesterday isn't going to work today, and what's working today isn't going to work tomorrow, or what worked 2 minutes ago might not be working now. So how do we dance in variety? Foreplay. Difference between men and women. I don't remember who first said this, but you can find a video online of me talking about it, that what kind of, if men and women were kitchen appliances, what kind of kitchen appliances would we be? Well, we would actually be women. Well, actually, let me start with men. Men are much more like the microwaves. They come on pretty darn quick. Couple minutes and we're good to go. If you want a hot, juicy, wet woman at night, you have to start turning her on in the morning. She's much more like a crock pot. It starts in the morning and you tend to it a couple of times during the day, and you're going to have a very different experience in the evening. So we really have to embrace this difference. And we can get frustrated, or we can accept that there's just a different way of being. Sensuality, we've spoken about it. Feeling like I can't do sensuality, I don't know what that means, I don't like that'll stop, or that'll put a limiter on what our best sexuality can be. Not bringing the heart. So remember earlier I said the presence of the masculine, and then he opens his heart and she goes, oh, if you leave your heart out, you can have good sex, but you're not going to have ecstatic ecstasy. You're not going to have divine union. The heart and the sex have to unite and circulate to have the fullest experience. You think you know, I'm sorry, thinking what you need is what she needs and wants. You're different. What works for you is not going to work for her. And we have to learn from each other. We have to discover each other. So discover her, discover the feminine. What does she need? How does she move? How does her energy move? What are her turn-ons? And I'm using her in the collective. And there's going to be the specifics of your partner. And then there are some very big commonalities across women. So we want to see and learn and expand your capacity to bring intimate sexual loving with a female partner. Let's talk about women. The ways women undermine sex. We don't know our own desires and turn-ons. And if we know them, we're not expressing them. They want masculine men, and I am talking heterosexual relationship right now, masculine when men want to turn on their women. They want her to have pleasure. They are turned on by her pleasure. So when he asks, what would you like from me? What would turn you on? It is such a huge generosity to have the self-knowing to be able to express that. And sometimes it's to, even when they haven't asked, to say, would you go a millimeter towards 7 o'clock? And that is going to have all the difference on her clitoris or not. Because you, women, were actually willing to ask him to move a millimeter when your brain said that's silly. Because believe me, I've been there. You knowing what you need, want, and desire are going and expressing it is going to make so much difference. Telling him he's doing it wrong or expecting him to read your mind, you've got to be in this dance with him. He can't figure it out on his own. You got to talk about it. You got to practice. You got to experience and share and not expect him to read your mind. Receiving. The feminine receives. The feminine receives. The feminine receives. The masculine wants to give. The masculine wants to pleasure. And so your capacity to receive or your incapacity to receive, that's going to be the limiter. That's going to be what puts the stopper on soulful sex. So your job is to expand your receiving muscle and to clear out everything that says you're not supposed to receive. Because most women today who are conditioned to be strong, powerful, do it all, get it all done, have really weak receiving muscles. And they have those weak receiving muscles because of all the conditioning. So we've got to clear that out in order to allow yourself to actually receive. Not expressing yourself, being unresponsive or unexpressive. They like seeing, they like hearing your sounds, your pleasures. And if it's not working, give him the gift of telling him what it is you truly desire, which takes you back to point one. So how do you, and again, this is actually a sensuality. It's your own sensuality to begin expressing the pleasure that you're having, because it makes it so much better for you and so much better for them. And then if we get caught in the fairy tale Harlequin romance, that you paint that picture and then you're comparing what's going on to that picture that you've painted, this doesn't have a chance. But if you'll stay in the moment of the experience and the next moment and the next moment and the next moment, at that point, you can actually create something that is better than the Harlequin romance because it was designed for your two souls together. This was a couple that actually did the work together. And that wasn't space. They weren't having nearly the communication or the lovemaking that they wanted. And now addressing issues more easily, not brushing over them. We're in better and more frequent communication, and we're having more sex. Like, sex is so tied to everything else that's going on in a relationship. And yes, we've got to work with the sexuality and look at what is getting in the way, whether it's within us or it's an expectation or it's a way of being. But then we can't look at sex without looking at all the other dynamics that are happening within us and in the relationship. So, what do you do next? This is your question. You are on this path. You chose to be here right now. And then what is your next step? And what's really important is to listen to you. That part of you that clicked to watch this, to be here. It knows what your soul wants. And that's what you need to listen to. It knows that there is absolute love for you. There is soul partnership for you. And you have to honor the fears as well. But you can't let them stop you. So you got to get clear, because the fears are also what become the roadblocks and the barriers. So you got to get clear on exactly what you need on your personal path. And we've walked through the common path here that will take every single individual and every single couple into the ecstasy. And then there is the unique variation for you and what needs to happen on your path. And that's going to be different beliefs that need to be cleared. That's going to be different saboteurs that show up. It's going to be different reactions. It's going to be different past experiences that need to be let go of. But your path, this is about you. And sometimes it is easier to have someone looking and helping us because we've got blind spots. And so I am personally committed to helping you pinpoint the number one thing keeping you from soul love. If you want my support on getting clear on what you need on your personal path, I am available. That's why I walk the planet. So that's an opportunity that you have. But what's most important is that you take the next step that is for you. And if you want support, that is available. You can find out how to get that support and all the details by going to thepathofsoullove.com. I am not going into any of that here. What I want you to hear is there is support, personal, one-on-one, if that's what you want. And you can get all the details about how that looks and how that works at thepathofsoullove.com. What you're also going to get on that page is a summary of much of what we went through here in the phases so that you can see, again, that path. And as you look through that, there will be links to choose if you want some support from me. So that's all I want to say about that. But know that my heart and soul are so committed to this. You've seen some of the stories here. It brings tears to my eyes when I get to see someone wake up to the possibilities of love. One of my dearest friends used to come to me and cry and cry and cry. And she was a German woman, so in her masculine, so afraid that she'd never be loved that she pushed it away all the time. And she stepped onto her path and she walked it and she walked it and she walked it. And the man that she is married to now, she brought that feminine energy, finally learned how to go out and be social without looking for someone, going to make herself happy, going to enjoy, going to be her ecstatic self. And that's when he walked in, when she was lit up being her. And he said her smile which, oh, by the way, is one of those feminine expressions. Her smile was extraordinary. And we can't fake that radiant smile. And they have had the most magical love story. And I love watching them. But it's because she did the work and she called in someone that would walk this path with her and meet her soul to soul. So, thepathofsoullove.com. I would love to support you. And this is a gentleman. I've made many attempts at personal growth, why I chose the women I do. And that he had read a book right before he wrote this. And he said the dedication in that book was to all those who have dared to look into their fears and find their hearts. That's what this journey is about. That we have to face the fears. We have to face the saboteurs. And when we do, it is the opportunity to get in touch with, for him, the real and powerful guy who might have been MIA. On the feminine flip side, it wasn't a coincidence that I met the love of my life a few weeks before the end of her journey. During that courtship, where he actually said to her, the more vulnerable you are, the safer I feel. Creating that masculine and feminine dynamic. The more vulnerable I am, the safer he feels. It can be an oxymoron to our brain, but love isn't logical. Love isn't, it's just plain, I'll believe it. Love isn't logical. Love is this sensual, emotional, deep felt body experience. And they are now, you'll see their wedding picture, they are also married. So one last share and I'll close. The answers are pinpoint correct and very direct. We can't know the path until we walk the path. But we can know the steps on the path. And that creates the light at the end of the tunnel that we didn't know was there. She says, I've talked a lot and it didn't fix the problem. And it takes so long. This makes the process so much more profound and immediate. So this does not have to take forever. I shared the woman who in less than a year went from, I am not cut out for love, to being married. How quickly we can change. Because I don't want you to suffer. I don't want to suffer any longer than I had to. I don't want you to struggle or suffer or have any less years of love than you can possibly have. So I invite you to be in deep relationship with yourself. What is the truth for you? What is the thing you've sat and been with this each moment? What will take you to the next step? And if you want some very direct insight from me to help you pinpoint what it is you need and what the next steps are for you, exactly where you are, I would be honored to support you. thepathofsoullove.com.